Recording in progress. Hello guys, welcome to BM's Online Institute. My name is Dr. Maxwell Avani, and today we'll be talking about bones of the forearm. Okay, but before we dive into that, please remember to like and comment on any of our social media handles, even on the YouTube channel. But more importantly, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're interested in online tutorials, we use one of the available virtual classrooms, Teachmeet, and we deal on anatomy, physiology, and pharmacology. If you're interested in any of these courses, please do well to reach out to me on the number in the description box of this video. Okay, so without much further ado, today, like I said, we'll be talking about the bones of the forearm. There are two bones of the forearm, and we'll be taking roughly 30 to 45 minutes to deal with these two bones very quickly. Okay, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the lecture. The two bones of the forearm is the ulnar bone and the radius. The radius is the lateral bone of the forearm. This is the forearm, okay? In anatomical, too bad. You won't be able to appreciate, but you get what I mean by anatomical position, right? So the lateral bone of the forearm, right, is the ulnar, is rather the radius, while the medial bone of the forearm is the ulnar bone. Okay, so we'll talk about them one by one, and we'll start with the radius. So by way of introduction, I said the radius is the lateral bone of the forearm. Okay, just a moment, please. Let's move. Okay. Yeah. So I'll just show you this pictorial diagram before we go to the 3D model. Okay, so like I said, this is the ulnar bone, the medial bone, and this is the radius. Okay, zoom in a little bit again. Okay, so this is the radius, and what this is the ulnar. And we'll be talking about these two bones using the outline introduction, features, site determination, and attachments, then clinical anatomy. So starting with the radius, I'm going to share my screen now so that we can describe this bone. Okay, so I believe you can see my screen, right? So this is the forearm between the elbow and the wrist joint is your forearm. Now, I said the lateral bone is the radius, and then the medial bone is the ulna. So for the radius, describing or the features of this radius, if you want to describe this radius, describe it under three headings. It has an upper end, it has a shaft, and it has the lower end. Okay, so this is the upper end. Follow my cursor. We have the shaft, and then we have the lower end down here. Okay, so for the upper end, it has three important features. One, it has the head. Okay, this is the head of the radius. Okay, which is disc shaped. All right, you can see it's disc shaped, and it articulates with the capitulum of the humerus. Okay, it also has the radial tuberosity, the medial aspect. All right. And then between the neck and this radial tuberosity, between the head and the radial tuberosity, you can see this portion here where my arrow or my cursor is, that is the neck. of the radius. So we have the head, the neck, and the radial tuberosity. Now the shaft has three borders and three surfaces. It has the anterior border. Okay, here it is. It also has the medial border. This is the medial border here, or interosseous border, because interosseous membrane is attached at the interosseous border. Okay, and then it also has the posterior border, right? You can appreciate it here. Now, between the posterior border and the anterior border, we have the lateral surface. And between the anterior border and the medial border, we have the anterior surface. And between the medial border and the posterior border, right, we have the posterior surface over here. So three surfaces, anterior, posterior, and lateral surface, and then three borders, anterior, posterior, and medial or interosseous border. Okay. Now, for the lower end, it has two or three very important features. The lateral surface has a downward continuation or projection called the styloid process. Okay. There you go. You can see this downward projection. That's the styloid process. Okay. While on the medial surface, or rather the medial aspect, not really the surface, okay, if I hide this ulnar bone now, you would see this notch here. This is called the ulnar notch for articulation with the head of the ulna. All right. And then finally, on the posterior aspect, we have this tubercle here called dorsal tubercle of Lister, L-I-S-T-E-R, Lister. Okay, so those are the three important features in the lower end. Now, site determination, following our format, where I said that we differentiate between anterior from posterior, lateral from medial, and then superior from inferior. The superior aspect bears the head, which is disc-shaped. So you have to orient the head of the radius superiorly. Okay. How do you know the anterior from the posterior? The posterior aspect at the lower end has the dorsal tubercle of Lister. Okay. And then finally, the medial border is sharp. Okay. The interosseous border is so sharp and prominent, so it always faces medially, okay? Right there. So that's site determination. Then under attachments, we're not going to waste so much time here because most times questions, they rarely come around these aspects. Yeah, so we're not going to waste so much time on this. Remember, the whole essence of this is basically to help you pass your examinations and also give you very sound understanding and knowledge about the gross anatomy of this region. So for the attachment, on the radial tuberosity, but before we get to attachment, I think it's proper we also do the ulnar bone. So when we're doing the attachment, since the bone, some of the muscles come from both bones, it's only wise if I finish with the ulnar. So for the ulnar bone, it is the medial bone of the forearm. That's by way of introduction. Okay. You can also describe it on the three headings: the upper end, the shaft, and the lower end. For the upper end, it has two processes and two notches. I'm going to hide the humerus now so you can appreciate this. Okay, so The ulnar bone has two processes, right? This is the coronoid process, and this one that projects upward is called a cranial process. You can see it goes to the olecranon fossa of the humerus, while now, hold on. Now, between these two processes, we have the trochlear notch, where the trochlea of the humerus articulates. Okay, this is the trochlea of the humerus. So we have the trochlear notch, the two processes, and then at this other portion here, if I hide the radius, you can see there's a notch there. This is the radial notch, okay, for the head of the radius. So now, just below the coronoid process, we have the ulnar tuberosity. You can see this roughened area here. This is your ulnar tuberosity, right? And we go to the shaft. Now, the shaft of the ulna can also be described as having three surfaces and three borders, same as the radius. Okay, so anterior border, posterior border, interosseous and lateral border this time around. Okay, since it's the medial border, a bit of lateral border, right? And then we also have the between the anterior border and the posterior border, the medial surface, not lateral surface, medial surface. We have the between the lateral border and the anterior border, the anterior surface, and finally between the interosseous border and the posterior border, the posterior surface. Okay, so now for the lower end, surprisingly, the ulna has its head distally. Okay, so you can see this portion here. This is the head of the ulnar bone. Okay, it articulates with the radius here at the ulnar notch. Okay, while we also have the styloid process posteromedial to the head of the ulnar bone. Okay, so that's by way of features or the both bones. So now let's talk about attachments. I'm going to, we're going to take the attachments gradually. So let's start with what we have here. Okay, so we have the pronator quadratus, okay, arising from the ulna to the radius. Okay, so this is your pronator quadratus. All right, up here is your supinator muscle. The supinator muscle has two heads. From this diagram, you can see that one of the head is coming from the humerus at the lower 1/3 of the lateral supracondylar ridge. Okay, while the other comes from the ulnar bone at a point called the supinator crest. Okay, right there, that's where it's coming from. And then it attaches on the radius, just below the neck on the anterior aspect. All right, so we have the supinator muscle there. Now, there is also another muscle here posteriorly. This is your extensor indicis, while this is your extensor pollicis brevis. On the posterior aspect, extensor pollicis brevis, okay, originates from the radius. The extensor indicis arises from the ulna posteriorly. Also, extensor pollicis longus, somewhere where my cursor is, and finally abductor pollicis longus from both the radius and the ulna, somewhere here. Okay, you still see that when it's time. Let's proceed. Let's see what muscle is next. Okay, so flexor carpi ulnaris comes from the common flexor origin from the humerus, that's the medial epicondyles, but it doesn't attach anywhere on any of these bones of the forearm. So I'm going to hide that. All right. Now, this is your flexor digitorum profundus. You can see a very large muscle that comes from the ulnar bone, anterior surface, the medial surface, all the way to the posterior surface. It's a very large muscle. Okay. Now, so we have that. We also have the flexor pollicis longus. This is on the radius. You can see it there. Okay. This is your flexor pollicis longus right there, coming from the radius on the anterior aspect, anterior surface. Then let's proceed. Now, let's go behind and see what is here for us. So posteriorly, this is that abductor pollicis longus muscle I talked about. This is your extensor pollicis longus, extensor indicis, and then extensor pollicis brevis. These are the muscles from the posterior aspect of these bones, All right. Then the extensor carpi ulnaris, digiti, carpi brevis, they don't attach anywhere on these two bones. So we're not going to talk about those ones. However, you can see this is your flexor digitorum superficialis. Let me hide your palmaris longus. So this flexor digitorum superficialis comes from three places. One from the radius along the anterior border, anterior oblique ridge. Okay. It also comes from the ulna, somewhere around the medial aspect of the coronoid process, and finally from the medial epicondyle. Okay. So that's your flexor digitorum superficialis. Like the name implies, it's superficial, right? Then we have, this is your brachialis muscle. It goes to the radial tuberosity. Sorry, the ulnar tuberosity. Okay. While your biceps brachii goes to the radial tuberosity. All right. So we'll see that shortly. Let's see what muscle is next. Good. You see, this is your biceps brachii. I can see tendon going all the way to the radial tuberosity on the posterior aspect. Okay. Then we have this flexor carpi radialis. All these muscles are flexor muscles, but they are not attached on either the radius or the ulna, so we're not going to talk about it. Okay. Finally, we have the brachioradialis muscle. This is attached somewhere on the radius close to the styloid process. Okay. So this thick muscle right here, that's your brachioradialis. All right. So that is by way of attachment. Now let's get, I think I can stop sharing my screen now. Now, yes, where is the whiteboard? So that's, now, like I said, we'll talk about these two bones on the under introduction, features, site determination, attachments, and of course, clinical anatomy. Now, lest I forget, the ulnar bone, I didn't talk about the side determination. For the ulnar bone, that concavity is always superior. So you always find that hook-like aspect or structure. This portion here, the hook-like portion, is let me see if I can point that out. Okay, this hook-like portion where we have the trochlear notch is always facing forwards and it's found superiorly. Okay, so that's how you differentiate the superior aspect from the inferior aspect. Now, the lateral border is quite thick and sharp. Okay, so it's pointing laterally, and then finally, how do you differentiate it? The anterior aspect from the posterior aspect. The coronoid or the ulnar tuberosity, that roughened area below the coronoid process, is found anteriorly. So if you can use these features to orient this bone, then you're good to go. You'll be able to tell which side this bone is. Is it right or is it left? All right. So you could also have a drill diagram here. Label this by yourself from what I told you. Okay, there is something I didn't say. One of the attachments is your pronator teres. Okay, right here, follow my pointer. I hope you can see my pointer. That muscle, the pronator teres, is inserted on the radius, just about the middle 1/3 on the lateral surface, right? Now, it comes from two places. Okay, comes from two places. Comes from two places. Right here, one from the ulnar bone, where my red cutter is, or red laser is, or pointer. And then the other comes from the medial supracondylar ridge. So there are two heads. I forgot to show that to you guys on the 3D model. So two heads of the pronator teres all the way down to the radius, okay? So while this one here on the, follow my pointer, on the olecranon process, that's your triceps brachii. Okay, posterior to the superior surface of the olecranon, you have the triceps brachii being inserted there. Okay? So for the clinical anatomy, for the radius, it's usually, you see parents lifting their kids, okay, children, holding their right hand and the left hand and just pull them up. Now, that can cause subluxation of the head of the radius because you can look at it right here, isn't it? It is not, it's disc-shaped, so the capitulum just comes this way, right? So if you pull this guy out, that is the humerus, it could subluxate, like pull out, okay, from the annular ligament that is holding that bone, those bones together, okay? So that is one aspect. And then the distal aspect of the radius is usually fractured. That's the most prone area that to fracture, okay? So that fracture, if the distal aspect is found posteriorly, that's Colles fracture, Diener fork deformity. If it is found anteriorly, okay, that's Smith's fracture, all right? Now, for the ulnar bone, you could have fracture. As a matter of fact, if you can't remember any clinical anatomy of any bone, just at least remember fracture. The bones can get fractured. It could get fractured along with the radius, it get fractured on its own, isolated, okay? And then there is a deformity called Madelung's deformity, where this styloid process, okay, gets very prominent, all right, due to underdevelopment of the radius, the lower end of the radius, okay? So Madelung's deformity, you could You look that up. At this level, I really don't think we should dive into the whole thing. Just for you to write 1 or 2 lines in your note in the case of exams. All right, so yes, I think we've been able to cover both the radius and the ulnar bone. All right, so if you have any questions, if you have any further questions, please do well to reach out to me through the phone number in the description box, and I'll be happy to help you out. Meanwhile, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on any of our social media handles via Facebook or Instagram, all BM Online Institute. If you're interested in online tutorials through a virtual classroom teachings where you have virtual tests, homework, assignments, exams, attendance, etc., live classes, please do well to reach out to me through the number on the description box, right? So that'll be all for today. Next week or next lecture, we would be talking about bones of the hand. And after that, we would be done with this series, osteology of the upper limbs, okay? For now, you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.